The portrait from 1914 at first glance seems ordinary. A simple mother and child frozen in time, a familiar pose that radiates gentleness and domestic calm. Yet it is precisely within this apparent normalcy that the first and most profound tension lies. The mask of the ordinary, so deceptively calm, conceals within it the entire architecture of the human psyche. It is the face we wear for the world, the image we construct to hide our turmoil, our fears, and the fractures within our inner lives. The mother's composed expression, her careful posture, the stillness of the child, all are elements of a collective performance, an unconscious agreement to maintain the illusion that everything is as it should be. But the photograph as an object betrays something more. It becomes a vessel through which the unconscious reveals itself, however subtly. The shadows in the frame, the tension in the mother's unseen hand, the slightly stiff demeanor of the child, all whisper of the unseen. The mask of the ordinary has always served as both protection and prison. Humanity has built entire civilizations upon it, shaping cultures that praise composure and propriety, while quietly burying pain beneath silence. The photograph, then, captures not only a mother and child, but an entire era's moral and emotional climate. The early 1900s were a time of great restraint. Appearances were to be maintained at all costs, emotions were to be contained, and social order was guarded by propriety. The portrait reflects this. The mother's calmness is not just personal, it is cultural, inherited, and expected. Yet beneath that stillness, there is the same pulse of humanity that cannot be silenced, the rawness of life that defies aesthetic control. The hidden hand, not yet discussed in this keynote, lingers like an unspoken truth, reminding us that even the most innocent appearances carry the echo of something concealed. In every human life, there exists this tension between what is shown and what is hidden. We move through our days constructing masks of politeness, stability, and perfection, masks that protect us from the scrutiny of others, and perhaps more importantly, from the chaos within ourselves. The photograph captures this tension in visual form. The light, the posture, the gentle arrangement, these are the visible parts of the mask. Yet, just as every shadow in a photograph owes its existence to light, every appearance of normalcy owes its form to something darker beneath it. It is the shadow that gives the mask its shape. Without the hidden struggle, the illusion would not need to exist. The mask of the ordinary also represents the fragile balance between being and seeming. In the portrait, the mother must seem calm, devoted, gentle. The child must seem innocent, pure, untouched. But life does not permit such purity to exist without conflict. The photograph, whether intentionally or not, captures the psychological truth that behind every appearance of harmony lies a concealed duality. The stillness of the image, then, becomes unsettling not because of what it shows, but because of what it refuses to reveal. The silence of the photograph feels heavy, as if something unspoken lingers in the air between the mother and child, between the viewer and the image. It invites us to confront the uncomfortable truth that what we present to the world is rarely the totality of what we are. The mask also functions as a defense mechanism, an ancient psychological armor. Humanity has learned to hide its wounds beneath smiles, its fears behind politeness, and its loneliness behind duty. The mother's expression in the portrait becomes a symbol of that armor. She must hold herself together, not for the camera alone, but for the world that demands her composure. The photograph, though frozen in time, pulsates with the weight of that demand. The ordinary appearance is thus not a lie, but a necessary disguise, a survival strategy in a world that punishes vulnerability. Yet this very disguise can suffocate the authentic self, locking away emotions that long for expression. The viewer, sensing the tension between appearance and essence, feels both empathy and unease. What makes this mask so compelling is that it is not a conscious deception. It is a natural part of being human. We wear our masks not to deceive others, but to protect what is too tender to expose. The photograph, then, becomes a mirror not only of the mother, but of the viewer. It reflects the universal condition, the quiet war between who we are and who we must appear to be. The stillness of the portrait becomes a metaphor for the stillness we all maintain, while chaos stirs just beneath the surface. The ordinary face hides the extraordinary depth of inner experience. the unspoken narratives of fear, love, loss, and longing that shape every human life. To see beyond the mask of the ordinary requires an awakened perception, one that can read silence as eloquence, stillness as confession. The portrait invites that kind of seeing. It asks the viewer to look not just at what is captured, but at what is suppressed. The faint lines around the mother's eyes, the slight tension in her mouth, the almost imperceptible distance between her and the child. These small details form a language of the soul, a visual dialect of repression and tenderness intertwined. The ordinary becomes a cipher for the extraordinary, the visible a doorway to the invisible. Ultimately, the mask of the ordinary is not a condemnation but a revelation. It shows that human life is layered, that beneath every calm surface lies the vast and complex realm of emotion, memory, and shadow. The photograph from 1914, though it pretends to freeze time, actually captures motion, the eternal motion of concealment and revelation that defines the human spirit. Through the mask, we glimpse the truth that no mask can fully hide, that every ordinary image, every calm face, every perfect pose carries within it the heartbeat of something unspeakably real. The hidden hand in the portrait becomes more than a simple physical gesture. It transforms into a silent yet commanding symbol of control, one that bridges the conscious and unconscious dimensions of human behavior. At first, it appears as an innocent positioning of the mother's arm, perhaps a supportive hold to steady her child during the long photographic exposure typical of 1914 studios. Yet, upon closer inspection, it takes on a deeper psychological gravity. The hand, concealed beneath the folds of fabric, gripping the child unseen, speaks of something instinctive, something ancient, a force that seeks to guide, possess, and shape another being's existence. It becomes the invisible presence of authority that extends beyond the photograph itself, a symbol of the unseen influences that bind individuals to the unspoken expectations of family, culture, and the unconscious will of those who came before. The hand is not malevolent in itself. It is the embodiment of the paradox of love and control, the two forces that forever intertwine within the human heart. There is something profoundly unsettling about the hiddenness of the hand. When we cannot see it, we feel its power more acutely. The gesture becomes spectral, a ghostly metaphor for the unseen powers that operate beneath the surface of consciousness. Every human being is shaped by these invisible hands, the inherited habits, emotional patterns, and ancestral wounds that direct our lives in ways we rarely perceive. In this sense, the mother's hidden hand is not merely hers. It is the hand of history, the hand of generations, the hand of the collective psyche that molds the child before the child can even define themselves. The grip is both protective and possessive, nurturing yet restraining. It represents the way love often carries within it the seeds of control, and how guidance, when unexamined, can become a kind of imprisonment. The image captures this duality in haunting perfection. The mother, embodying both affection and dominance, holds her child close, yet the concealment of her hand transforms the gesture into an enigma. What is the nature of her hold? Is it gentle or firm? Is she comforting the child or anchoring them, ensuring they remain still and obedient for the photographer's lens? This ambiguity mirrors the complexity of human relationships, especially those defined by love that overprotects, care that confines, or guidance that suppresses growth. The hidden hand becomes a metaphor for how the psyche seeks to impose order upon chaos, how the parental instinct, in its deepest sense, struggles between releasing and restraining the child's emerging individuality. The unconscious desire to preserve innocence and maintain control merges into one shadowed act, a grip meant to protect that simultaneously binds. The hand also represents the unseen mechanisms of the human psyche itself. Much of what we do, feel, and believe is not consciously chosen. Our motivations are guided by inner forces we cannot see, fears, desires, memories, and archetypal imprints that shape our behavior. In the same way that the child is unaware of the hand that holds them, we too move through life unaware of the invisible energies that guide our choices. The hand beneath the fabric is the will of the unconscious, the deep instinctual presence that governs action without permission. It is both a comfort and a threat, a source of safety and a reminder of submission to forces beyond rational control. This dynamic is not limited to individuals but extends to societies, where unseen systems, traditions, and ideologies exert their influence in quiet yet powerful ways, shaping collective behavior with the same unseen grasp. There is an almost mythic resonance in the idea of a hidden hand. Across time, humanity has associated unseen forces with destiny, divine will, or fate. In this portrait, that myth is humanized and brought into the domestic realm. It is no longer a god's hand or the hand of fate, but a mother's, an intimate force of love that holds both creation and constraint within its palm. The gesture embodies the archetype of the great mother, the one who nurtures life yet also governs it, who shelters yet controls, who gives with one hand and restrains with the other. In her shadow form, this archetype becomes suffocating, possessive, unable to release what it loves most. Thus, the photograph captures not only a personal moment, but a universal truth, that love, when driven by fear of loss, can become indistinguishable from control. The hand's concealment adds to its symbolic weight. What is unseen becomes amplified in meaning. Its invisibility mirrors how control and influence often operate, quietly, indirectly, beneath the threshold of awareness. The child in the photograph smiles faintly, perhaps unaware of the hold, much like how individuals remain unaware of the subtle manipulations of family dynamics, cultural norms, or psychological complexes. The power of the hidden hand lies in its invisibility. Control unrecognized is control most effective. The portrait thus reveals a subtle, timeless truth that the deepest forms of bondage are rarely imposed by visible chains, but by the invisible threads of love, duty, and expectation. And yet, to recognize the hidden hand is also to awaken from its spell. The photograph, once analyzed, loses its innocence. The viewer cannot unsee what they have seen. The discovery of the concealed grip brings awareness to the unconscious act, and awareness itself is a form of liberation. What was once hidden becomes known, and in that knowing, both mother and child, both the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche, are transformed. The hand, though still unseen, loses its secret power when it is understood. In this way, the portrait becomes not just a relic of 1914, but a mirror for all who gaze upon it, a reminder that what binds us most deeply is often not what we can see, but what remains hidden beneath the surface, shaping us in silence. The child in the 1914 portrait stands as more than just a figure of innocence. The child becomes a vessel for the unconscious, a symbol of how purity and vulnerability absorb the psychic imprints of those who nurture them. In the still image, the child's expression seems calm, perhaps even trusting, but that very calmness carries a weight, the silent inheritance of emotions and patterns that precede conscious awareness. The relationship between mother and child captured here is not only biological, but psychological and symbolic. The mother, through her hidden hand, unconsciously transmits a world of inner experiences, fears, hopes, unspoken traumas, into the forming psyche of her child. The photograph, therefore, is not merely a family keepsake. It is a visual representation of the moment where the boundary between one generation's unconscious and the next's innocence dissolves. The child's stillness in the image becomes a metaphor for receptivity, for the mind that, before it can reason or resist, absorbs the energies surrounding it. Children are born into a field of emotion that they do not yet understand but instinctively feel. They are open vessels, like mirrors of the family soul, reflecting what is unseen yet deeply felt. The mother's presence, her tone, her gestures, her silences, becomes the child's first language of the psyche. Even what remains unspoken finds a way into the child's awareness through subtle cues and emotional vibrations. In the portrait, the hidden hand that holds the child signifies this invisible transfer, the passage of unconscious influence from one being to another. It is not intentional or malicious. It is the natural process of psychological inheritance. Every gesture, every moment of tension, every suppressed feeling in the mother becomes a silent teacher to the child, shaping an inner world before the outer one is ever understood. The child's apparent innocence, then, is deceptive, for it conceals the profound depth of what the young psyche carries. What looks pure and untouched may already be a canvas upon which ancestral emotions have been painted. This does not diminish the beauty of childhood, but rather reveals its sacred vulnerability. the way a young consciousness absorbs, without filter, the light and shadow of its surroundings. In this sense, the child embodies the collective memory of the family line. The photograph captures that transmission with haunting subtlety. The unseen hand resting upon or gripping the child becomes the conduit through which the invisible flows, the generational thread binding past to future, mother to offspring, consciousness to unconsciousness. The still image thus records not only a moment in time, but a psychological transaction as ancient as humanity itself. The child, unaware of this inheritance, carries it forward into life, repeating or reacting to patterns that were never consciously chosen. The photograph becomes prophetic. It freezes the moment before awareness, before individuality fully awakens, when the self is still forming under the influence of forces it cannot name. The innocence in the child's face might hold within it echoes of the mother's own suppressed fears, her longings, her griefs. These emotional currents, though invisible, shape the tone of the child's later relationships, behaviors, and even beliefs about love and safety. In this sense, the photograph is not just an artifact, but a psychological mirror reflecting the timeless truth that no one begins as a blank slate. The soul, even in infancy, is already engaged in a dialogue with what came before, a dialogue that defines the path toward individuality. The idea of the child as a vessel of the unconscious also speaks to the way society conditions the young. Every child enters not only a family but a culture, an inherited worldview filled with values and taboos, spoken and unspoken rules about what is acceptable to feel or express. The hidden hand in the portrait thus expands in meaning. It is not only the mother's hand, but the hand of the era itself, gently but firmly guiding the child into conformity with its ideals. In 1914, a world on the brink of war, a child was not just born into a family, but into the collective anxiety of an age. The innocence we perceive in the image is already shadowed by the social unconscious, the collective fear of instability, the cultural pressure to maintain order at all costs. The mother's hand, then, represents the guiding hand of civilization itself, shaping its future generation even as it hides its anxieties behind the mask of propriety. The child's role as vessel also contains a paradox. On one hand, the child passively receives the psychic imprints of those around them. On the other, within that receptivity lies the potential for renewal. The unconscious material that passes into the child does not simply replicate the past, it can be transformed. The child's innocence, though vulnerable, carries a latent power, the possibility of integrating and healing what has been carried forward. In the photograph, this potential is captured in the stillness of the child's gaze, in the quiet openness of being that has not yet hardened into defense. Though the hidden hand symbolizes the weight of inherited influence, the child's unknowing presence also symbolizes the eternal hope of renewal, that through awareness and time, what is transmitted unconsciously may one day be understood consciously. In every generation, the cycle repeats. The unconscious of the parents becomes the emotional foundation of the children, who in turn pass on their own mixture of awareness and shadow. The portrait from 1914 immortalizes a single moment within that infinite exchange. The child in the image stands as a timeless figure, both burdened and blessed, absorbing what is hidden, yet holding within them the seed of transformation. They are the vessel through which the past becomes the future, the silent receiver of love's complexity, fear's persistence, and the unending human attempt to turn what is unconscious into light. The photograph from 1914, though seemingly a simple domestic portrait, is far more than a relic of its time. It is a mirror of the collective human soul, a reflection of the universal patterns, fears, and unspoken truths that shape societies across generations. The image transcends the individuals within it. The mother and child become archetypes rather than mere subjects. Their frozen expressions, their stillness, their carefully arranged pose all point towards something larger than themselves. The cultural psyche of an age attempting to maintain composure amid the currents of transformation and uncertainty. The photograph is not just a record of two people, but an artifact of the collective unconscious, where every gesture and every shadow becomes symbolic of humanity's shared inner struggles. The mother's hidden hand, in this context, becomes the unseen force of societal control, of the world's quiet insistence on maintaining appearances, even as deeper instincts stir beneath the surface. To understand the photograph as a mirror of the collective unconscious is to see it not through the lens of history alone, but through the deeper fabric of symbolism. 1914 was a year poised on the edge of chaos. The dawn of the First World War, the crumbling of empires, the shifting of human consciousness from certainty into anxiety. The photograph's stillness is almost prophetic. It captures a world that did not yet know it was about to lose its innocence. The mother's hidden hand can thus be seen as the embodiment of the era's psychological climate, the invisible grip of convention, morality, and fear holding society in place, trying to prevent what was inevitable: change. The portrait's calm surface conceals the tremor of collective tension, the silent dread that humanity carried into the war years. Every image from that time, especially one as intimate as this, becomes a kind of dream symbol, the conscious world struggling to suppress the unconscious awareness of the storm to come. The photograph's composition plays directly into this dynamic. Everything about it is constructed to communicate stability: the posture of the mother, the centered framing, the soft lighting. Yet this very perfection feels unnerving, as though something vital has been repressed. The aesthetic beauty of the image becomes a metaphor for the way civilizations mask their discomfort behind ideals of order and virtue. The mother's hidden hand, unseen yet profoundly felt, symbolizes the repressed side of that order, the instinctive, emotional, uncontrollable aspects of life that must remain concealed to preserve the illusion of civility. In this way, the photograph speaks not just for one family, but for the collective human condition, the eternal struggle between the need for control and the reality of the unconscious forces that defy it. This tension between appearance and truth is not unique to the early 20th century. Every era, in its own way, constructs images to protect itself from self-knowledge. Photographs, paintings, traditions, and social customs often serve as the masks of entire cultures, disguising the psychological undercurrents that cannot be expressed openly. The 1914 portrait functions precisely as such a mask, an attempt to capture stability in a moment when the world was teetering toward fragmentation. The innocence of the child, the composure of the mother, the warmth of the scene, all these elements are part of a collective wish, a longing for purity and permanence in a reality that was already eroding. The hidden hand, however, disrupts that illusion. It is the subconscious breaking through the surface of the collective mind, revealing that beneath beauty lies repression. Beneath calmness lies fear. The photograph becomes a symbol of humanity's deep denial, its endless effort to maintain the appearance of light while concealing the presence of shadow. There is also a profound universality in this image. Though it belongs to a specific moment in time, its emotional resonance transcends generations. Every culture has known this dynamic, the tension between what is shown and what is concealed, between what is allowed to be expressed and what must remain buried. The hidden hand, in its quiet power, represents all that society has deemed unspeakable: grief, anger, sexuality, instinct, and the wildness of human emotion. The photograph is thus not only a depiction of two figures, but a meditation on the human impulse to hide what is most real. Its very composition mirrors the architecture of the collective psyche: light in the foreground, shadow beneath, carefully arranged to preserve order while concealing the chaos that gives it meaning. The mother and child in the photograph unknowingly embody this collective pattern. They are not merely individuals acting within a private moment, but participants in a universal drama of repression and revelation. The calmness in their faces, the careful posture, the balance of affection and restraint all reflect humanity's ongoing attempt to reconcile instinct with morality, feeling with form, chaos with control. The mother's hidden hand, especially, serves as the point where the unconscious asserts itself, reminding the viewer that no mask is without its cracks. It is as if the photograph itself carries the voice of the collective unconscious, whispering through the image that perfection is always an illusion, and that beneath every image of harmony lies the eternal shadow that sustains it. The more one contemplates the portrait, the more it ceases to be an artifact and becomes an archetype. It is no longer just a mother and child in 1914. It is humanity itself, caught between innocence and experience, between the need to preserve light and the inevitability of darkness. The photograph becomes a dream of civilization, beautiful, ordered, fragile, and the hidden hand becomes the truth it cannot bear to speak. Through its silence, the image reveals the universal law of the psyche, that every collective ideal casts a shadow, and that every attempt to suppress that shadow only deepens its power. In this way, the photograph serves not just as a mirror of the collective unconscious, but as a quiet prophecy that what is hidden will one day demand to be seen, and that within the illusion of innocence, the truth of the human soul is always waiting to be revealed. When the viewer first encounters the portrait, there is a moment of quiet acceptance, a mother, a child, a scene of tenderness from a bygone age. But when the eye lingers and notices the hidden hand, something shifts inside. The illusion cracks and the image begins to breathe differently. What once seemed comforting now feels slightly haunted, alive with an undercurrent of unease. This small discovery transforms the act of looking into an act of revelation. The photograph ceases to be a frozen relic and becomes a living dialogue between the seen and the unseen, the conscious and the unconscious, the truth and the illusion. That single hidden hand is the hinge on which the entire perception turns, a key that unlocks a deeper layer of meaning. The moment of realization, the awareness of what was concealed, mirrors the moment in human consciousness when denial breaks and truth emerges from the shadow. In that revelation, something within the viewer awakens. The photograph becomes a mirror of the self, reflecting not only the hidden tension between mother and child, but the hidden aspects within every human soul. The viewer realizes that the darkness within the image is not confined to the figures it portrays. It lives in us as well. The unease we feel upon noticing the mother's concealed grip is the echo of our own inner recognition, that we too carry what we hide, that every calm surface conceals a story, that our gestures of love and care often carry threads of fear, control, and longing. The photograph thus transforms into a psychological encounter. It speaks directly to the subconscious, stirring the ancient awareness that truth is rarely pure and that innocence, once examined, is never untouched. This revelation does not condemn the mother, it liberates her from the prison of idealization. In seeing the hidden hand, we begin to see her fully, not as a symbol of perfection, but as a human being bound by the contradictions of love and fear. She becomes real, fragile, layered. The child, too, takes on new depth, no longer a simple emblem of purity, but a participant in an invisible exchange of emotion and inheritance. What was once a sentimental image now becomes a portrait of complexity. The revelation reshapes the narrative. It invites compassion not only for the figures in the frame, but for all of humanity's struggle to reconcile light and shadow, to love without wounding, to nurture without binding. The act of seeing what was hidden mirrors the inner work of awakening, the moment when one becomes conscious of the unseen forces shaping their life. In the same way the viewer notices the hidden hand, an individual, in moments of introspection, begins to notice the quiet influences that guide their behavior. Old fears, inherited beliefs, emotional reflexes formed long before understanding. The photograph becomes a metaphor for that process of self-discovery. It suggests that truth is not revealed through seeking what is new, but by noticing what has always been there, waiting in the periphery of awareness. The revelation comes not from adding something to our vision, but from finally allowing ourselves to see what we once looked past. In this sense, the image teaches that revelation is both unsettling and necessary. The breaking of illusion is never comfortable, for it strips away the simplicity we cling to. Yet only through that discomfort does true understanding emerge. The hidden hand, once seen, cannot be unseen, just as self-awareness, once awakened, cannot return to innocence. This transformation is painful but essential. The darkness revealed within the photograph is not an enemy but a guide. It points the way toward wholeness.